Welcome to Dynasty Life. I'm Theo Gremminger. Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. And I'm excited today to have Davis Mattek in over here, his first appearance on Dynasty Life. I've had Davis on a few of my other podcasts. You're sort of everywhere this time of year, Davis. I know you're in the best ball streets, putting out a lot of content, putting a lot of redraft content, but today we're talking some Dynasty. Davis and I are going head-to-head in a redraft league next week, an FFPC one we do every single year. So it's nice to kind of get in here, talk a little Dynasty with Davis. It's kind of be redraft season, but we still very much have our Dynasty minds right here on Dynasty Life every single week, and we're going to pick your brain today. Davis, what do you have dropping this time of year?
Right now we've got the Take Cast coming out weekly. We've got the Sports Grid Fantasy Football Podcast coming out multi-weekly. You guys can catch me every day on Sports Grid TV. I'm on in the mornings and in the afternoons, and my show is on Saturday mornings there at 8 a.m. So just redraft, best ball, dynasty. We are in all the streets. This is the greatest time of year, really, if you're a real fantasy football nerd.
Yeah, this is great. It's sort of like you hear these people coming kind of out of the woodworks being like, "Oh, I'm ready to draft. It's August 1st." And we're like, we've been drafting since the Super Bowl. I mean, we do like a best ball draft right before the Super Bowl. I think we did it this year. Like a 28 rounder that we usually do on FFPC. But it's great to draft this time of year. I think you find some incredible values, and one position where sort of you see a lot of sharp minds going to in early best balls, certainly before the NFL draft, was the rookie class. The rookies are usually undervalued. A couple of the guys are already priced up, like Marvin Harrison Jr., but after the NFL draft, usually it's a slow burn, and you see these guys start to move up. Even guys like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels start moving up a little bit. But wanted to kind of dive into this rookie class a little bit with you. You put a lot of time and energy into your own personal rankings, your draft targets, your draft strategy. If you could know the final stats of any single rookie, who would it be?
I think you got to go Xavier Worthy, because he is the, he's kind of the lightning rod prospect. He's probably the guy who proportionally moved up the most in rankings based on where he landed. Maybe Keon Coleman moved up about the same amount due to landing spot. But it also, it would inform you on a lot of other things, right? Knowing his stat line is going to give you an insight into Kelsey's stat line, into Mahomes' stat line. But I am very inclined to take Xavier Worthy in rookie drafts, very inclined to try and acquire him. And, knowing that is really just going to inform my strategy kind of overall for everything this upcoming season.
Yeah, he's sort of like the skeleton key for the entire passing game, because if we can see his final stats and he gets 125 targets, 135 targets, it's like, okay, Xavier Worthy kind of usurped all those other guys. But if he has 90 targets and it doesn't work out like we think, then that could be like a big disappointment where people are currently drafting him that. I'm on the bullish side with Xavier Worthy. I think he's going to make a big impact with that offense, and I like the talent a lot. Contributed early on at Texas. No reason to think he can't contribute early on in Kansas City as well. And they really kind of showed their hand by taking him in the first round. First time Kansas City has drafted a wide receiver in the first round since 2011. So that one is fun. How about an ascending offense? Because a lot of times, this applies to people doing dynasty startups, and it certainly applies to people doing early best balls. But if we can identify those ascending offenses, the offenses that are sort of mispriced, we can get 5-6 wins at ADP, and you see multiple guys just crushing it. Detroit last year, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jared Goff. You go down the list, they had wins. The year before that, we had Miami, where Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, Tua, everybody beat their ADP. We saw Seattle 2 years ago, where the Geno Smith year, everybody beats their ADP, and we are able to get a lot of value out of guys that don't cost so much. Who could be an offense right now that's a little bit mispriced that you could see taking a step forward?
I think the two. Well, I think the number one is the Atlanta Falcons. New quarterback, new coaching scheme, good talented players who are going to have a chance to get the ball instead of Jonnu Smith and not that Cordell Patterson and Jonnu Smith are bad players, but they were not not kind of the the be all end all. I mean, I think the Chicago Bears though is my answer. You get Waldron in there, you get the quarterback. I am sort of anticipating Caleb Williams having a CJ Stroud-Ian effect on that offense. We're like 4,100 passing yards and 30 passing touchdowns, maybe even more than that, is really not crazy or out of the realm of possibility to me.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And you could have gone with Caleb Williams as the player to know the final stats from, because he could raise all three of those wide receivers, maybe DeAndre Swift, maybe the Cole Kmet's like the forgotten fourth man. But if he has enough spike weeks with such a quality offense, he still might return value where he's going and where he's valued right now in Dynasty. Question for you, though, not on the show sheet, but you bring up the Chicago Bears. DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. Last year, we see DJ Moore finish as wide receiver 6 overall. He sort of had a significant dynasty boost after that year, because it was a year that people were waiting for a long, long time. Then they go ahead and trade for Keenan Allen, which is one that we sort of could brush off and say, there's room for a secondary target there that's not going to really crush DJ Moore. But then they've also added Rome Odunze with the 9th overall pick. Do you think that this is a time the dynasty managers should consider trading DJ Moore coming off of the big season, despite getting the high quality quarterback?
No way. No, I think you go the other way. I think you try and trade for him. I think you try and trade for Rome. Keenan Allen. I mean, send out some rookie 3rd round picks to Keenan Allen. 32-year-old wide receivers. The market demand not going to be high for them. Send out trade offers for Cole Kmet. I'm going totally the other way. I mean, I get why you would be doing that. Although, wide receiver 7 finish with Justin Fields, and then now in redraft leagues is going like wide receiver 15, wide receiver 18, somewhere there. Does adding Keenan Allen and a rookie wide receiver, like, I don't know. I feel like it's completely the other way. I feel like wide receiver 10-ish is kind of like the floor of what I expect for him, really.
Yeah, I can see your argument. And again, he's a super talented player, but it's just a matter of, is Rome Odunze that good that by the end of the year, we're like, this is the Rome Odunze offense, and you're talking about the secondary target. Now, it won't really matter if this is such a high-flying offense and they totally take that next step, but I always have it feels a little Amari Cooper, Dallas Cowboys, after we saw CeeDee Lamb drafted to Dallas. A little bit like that to me. That's my only concern with.
No, I think that's a good comparison, but I don't think Rome is nearly as good of a prospect as CeeDee. I think he's like, Rome is, to me, is kind of like a Michael Pittman level prospect. We're like really good, don't have any nits to pick, but to me will never be in the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill tier of players.
Well, there you go. Davis Mattek giving you a trade target, because right now Rome Odunze is ahead of DJ Moore on keep trade cut and on a number of dynasty rankings as well. So that offense could.
That's kind of wild to me, because DJ Moore's only 27, right? It's the cliff is. I mean, you can see the cliff for DJ Moore, but you're not having to like hit the brakes to avoid it yet. Like he's still got 2 years left before people start panic selling him.
It's funny because he has like the year we're all waiting on, and then he gets usurped by a younger teammate already. Just shows sort of the nature of dynasty right now. But today, this is a really, really fun one. Davis and I are going to give bold predictions. These predictions, we're going to drop 20 of them. We're going up and down the list, for some high-end players down to some guys that are absolute steals in dynasty right now in startups. This is going to be a really, really fun one. We're going to take a short break, and we come back. Davis, you're on the clock with your first bold prediction.
I'm on the clock.
This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly, especially now. It's Best Ball Mania season, baby. Best Ball Mania 5. I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems. But they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When when you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off.
Davis, welcome back to Dynasty Life. A little Underdog commercial. What's your favorite, before we get into our hot takes, our bold predictions, what's your favorite Week 17 stack right now?
Minnesota, Green Bay. You can do it early. You can do Justin Jefferson and Josh Jacobs. And you can do it late. You can do, you can go Wicks, McCarthy, with Jordan Addison. You can use TJ Hawkinson. You can use Ty Chandler. Lots of ways you could do it. Dome game. I'm a little bit higher than the market on McCarthy and on the Packers. So that's the one I'm targeting the most right now.
I love it. I've had that as a couple people giving that as an answer. And I think right now, just it's a great game to attack because, like you said, there's a couple of expensive guys there, but Jordan Love is reasonably priced. There's a lot of sort of reasonably priced options in there. And I think that a lot of people are really hitting that Houston-Baltimore game, really hitting the San Francisco-Detroit game, a little bit higher profile. That Minnesota-Green Bay game, really, really interesting one. So that's a nice segue here. Hot takes, bold predictions. A lot of times people wait till the end of August to drop these ones. We're giving you this in May. Davis, you start us out. You have a Green Bay Packer as the first player listed, and this is a player that is red hot right now in the Dynasty streets.
Yeah, I've got two Packers hot takes on the list. Everyone loves this guy. Not like I'm breaking any news here. Dontavian Wicks. I mean, look, you just asked. You ask. Literally, you just walk down the street and be like, who are you drafting in Best Ball Mania 5? Who are you trying to trade for in Dynasty? And someone will just tell you Dontavian Wicks, 22 years old, coming out of the University of Virginia, led the Packers in targets per route run and yards per route run last season. 4 touchdowns on 58 targets, played the most snaps of everyone, of all their wide receivers in the playoff game. We just actually, as you and I are talking, we just had this story come out about Christian Watson's hamstring issues that he's trying to solve, where he realized that the muscle mass of his legs was not equal, and now he's narrowed that gap from a 20% difference to a 10% difference. I suppose we'll see what that does for him in 2024. But yeah, Dontavian Wicks leads all Packers skill position players in PPR fantasy points.
Yeah, and that's spicy because you're going ahead of all the running backs too. That would be like the ADP winner type outcome for Dontavian Wicks. We've talked about him a lot here on Player Profiler. Pretty much every sharp show is talking about Wicks a little bit because the price doesn't match up with the talent, and it's the ambiguity of the situation where people are betting on Jaden Reed, people are betting on Christian Watson bounce back. There's Romeo Doubs people out there. There's Luke Musgrave is the must-get guy right now. And he's sort of like, even though we saw it with our own 2 eyes with Wicks, like he's really, really good. And they seem like a smart coaching staff that's going to get him on the field. And we've actually had LaFleur make like some very, very positive comparisons for him and say some nice things about him as well. So there's the coach speak narrative as well. I love that one. You're getting us started with a really, really spicy one. I'm going to go with a little less under the radar guy, another guy that people love in Dynasty right now, and it's Anthony Richardson. But I'm going to say Anthony Richardson, we've seen it before where guys take a huge step in year 2. We saw it with Patrick Mahomes. We saw it with Lamar Jackson. We saw it with Jalen Hurts where he didn't have that sort of MVP season, but he gave us a top 5 scoring season in year 2. Anthony Richardson finishes as QB1 overall, and he just misses Lamar Jackson's 2019 numbers. He gives you like Lamar Jackson 2019, Josh Allen 2020, like if you're in a 4-point passing, like 400 fantasy points. I think he goes absolutely nuts. He is efficient with his legs, stays healthy the entire year. The whole narrative that he's injury prone will go out the window. And I think he's going to be much more efficient as a passer than some people think. Talk that they're using the tight end more. They draft Adonai Mitchell. I think Josh Downs is an underrated player, and Michael Pittman, provided there's nothing with this little knee bump thing, is going to be Michael Pittman. I think that Richardson goes absolutely nuts.
I love it. Yeah. So Shane Steichen is just kind of like the cheat code for calling plays for quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson, I mean, we only got like 8.5 quarters of him as a professional quarterback last season in the regular season. And he was awesome. I mean, he led fantasy quarterbacks in points per quarter in the quarters that he was available last season. He's a phenomenal rusher. He adds A.D. Mitchell to that rotating cast of Desmond Patton, Mike Strachan. I mean, look, name a freaky athletic Colts wide receiver who's played that position for the last 4 years. A.D. Mitchell's like the final evolution of that. They've got that cast and crew of tight ends. I mean, if he scored 20 rushing touchdowns, I really don't think I would be that surprised. Really, the only concern, the only thing keeping me from being a Super Bowl on Anthony Richardson is that I am worried he has no interest in protecting himself on these runs the way that Lamar Jackson does. It's actually the same concern I have about Jaden Daniels, where I need them to demonstrate me some evidence that they can be a great running quarterback and protect themselves.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels takes some significant hits. I almost did a Jaden Daniels bold prediction, but I didn't do it this time. Why don't you take us off with your next big hot take bold prediction?
All right, next one, I've got Chase Brown finishes as running back 15 or better in fantasy points per game. This one is really not even all that nuanced. The Bengals are a great offense for fantasy points for their running backs. We have seen Joe Mixon do that. Like every running back that has played with Joe Burrow, specifically Clyde at LSU. I mean, just like Chase Brown and those guys off the bench last offseason. And they added no one in the running back room. So they add Moss for 2 years, $8 million. I think $6.5 million of that was guaranteed, maybe 5.5. But that is pretty standard. I mean, that's even kind of less than backup running back money. That's like not that much better than like what someone like Nyheim Hines would get, for guaranteed money. So they have Chase Brown, Travion Williams, Chris Evans. These guys have all been on the team. They had 2 UDFAs, Noah Cain and Elijah Collins. Not even a Braylon Allen, not even an Isaiah Davis, not even a Kamani Vidal in the 6th round, right? Not even J.K. Dobbins, come sign with us for the contract the Chargers gave you. Let's see if you have any juice, which leads me to believe one of two things. Either they're like, what, Zach Moss, you're getting 300 touches this year for the Bengals, or they actually were kind of planning on having Chase Brown be the lead back this year anyway, as he was kind of the understudy to Mixon last year. And I think it's more the latter than the former. And Chase Brown was a good prospect. He really only had the one good play last season, the long screen pass, but it's setting up to be pretty attractive for him, I think.
Chase Brown is like an on-brand guy for you now, Davis. Twice you've come on my pods and talked him up. A couple months ago, you sort of talked about how we could see the ADP ascension. It's funny. It feels like the Zach Moss, and I'm on Zach Moss, but I also I'm on Chase Brown. I think taking shots on both these guys, even in a dynasty startup, it's very doable where you can draft both of these guys. And it's certainly, you see that on Underdog a little bit, where it's set up where I can just draft both of them, have the entire Bengals, backfield, and I can basically go with like a hero RB build. Chase Brown, he's a high value touch guy in an offense where we could see the high value touch guy do really, really well. And they also lose Tyler Boyd, where it's sort of there's going to be a little bit of a change in terms of like how many receivers they're supporting, change at tight end as well. Mixon, huge loss. So Chase Brown's most familiar with the coaching staff. I like that one a lot. That's super exciting. I'm going to go with a wide receiver. And my next prediction is, we talked a little earlier about DJ Moore and how he had his career season when he played with a mobile quarterback like Justin Fields last year. I think that the biggest beneficiary of Jaden Daniels arriving in Washington and this Washington offense improving rapidly and ascending is Terry McLaurin has his best season ever. Terry McLaurin, we've been waiting around for years for Terry to have a really significant year. He's a very good player. He's had multiple seasons with like 75 catches. He's always good for 75 catches and 1,000 yards. This year takes it a step up. He has 85 catches, 1,300 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns. He sets records in all 3 categories, and he has his big career season attached to Jaden Daniels.
All right, this is the pushback I've got for you, which is that I sort of think Terry McLaurin has shown us who he is at the NFL level. I'm wondering if the way to play Jaden Daniels is actually better than Drake Maye, is way better than JJ McCarthy, is actually as talented of a passer as he was last season at LSU. I wonder if it's Jahan Dotson who scored all those touchdowns as a rookie, was basically useless last year. I mean, really, in that offense, there was really no point for him to be there. And my thought is that if Daniels is going to make someone much better and really increase their value in like playing this game from a market sense perspective, is I wonder if trading in fact, I have done this, trade the 308 in some of these leagues and get Jahan Dotson. That's a direction that I've gone.
I acquired a little bit of Dotson as well in Dynasty. Billy Muzio, who I record First Class Fantasy with, you've been on First Class Fantasy. Billy, he's on Jahan Dotson, big bounce back. Jahan Dotson right now is wide receiver 60 on Underdog. So if Davis and Billy are correct, this is going to be a really big win. I mean, he could roll out of bed and finish higher than wide receiver 60. I think if this offense takes a step forward. So TBD, we're butting heads a little bit on this one. We are back to you. You've got another spicy one, and a really fun one.
I do got a spicy one here. This one goes two ways, is informative in two ways. Jermaine Burton scores more fantasy points after week 9 than T. Higgins. This one goes two ways. The first one being, I think it's pretty clear why they drafted Burton, despite the, I guess you'd call it behavioral stuff, discipline-related stuff. I mean, he was a guy who transferred from Georgia to Alabama, ends up, leading Alabama in receiving his final season. He is a 4-year player, not a 3-year player the way we like. But, the film-based people who I trust, who I think are good at it, basically is like, that's a first-round guy. He just is basically, not he's a wild horse, right? He just kind of does what he wants. And I also am just like permanently looking for ways to fade T. Higgins. I am not really a T. Higgins guy. His best ever season, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. Yet every single season, we were like, oh, you got to take this guy in the second round. I mean, come on, he's T. Higgins. And it's like, we're still waiting for it. I mean, the Bengals I think I've broadcast pretty clearly, we're not paying you what you're asking. We will be moving on from you. And they'll feel much better about that if my prediction comes true and Burton does outperform him.
Burton was a guy that I drafted so much of in Dynasty. I have so many Burton shares right now. We've sort of talked about this 2025 contingent upside play where he could just be in the T. Higgins role. And the difference between him and Higgins is you got him cheaper in rookie drafts, 3rd rounder versus 2nd rounder when Higgins was drafted. And yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of really smart people. I know Sigmund Bloom was a really big Burton guy. There's like a lot of people that are on Jermaine Burton as this talent. 6 schools in 8 years. So like it's more of like he fell in the draft because of like a sort of like an attitude thing, but it's not like you have real off the field concerns where the guy's like actually getting in trouble. So you can reel that in with a winning organization like Cincinnati, who's actually had success with, guys who had, little things here and there. So I like this one a lot. I think it's also interesting. I'll kick this one back to you. If Burton's taking a huge step forward, do we see Jamar Chase bumping inside a little bit more this year and playing the slot a little bit more? Because Burton, if he's stepping on the field as the wide receiver 3 in the offense and the de facto T. Higgins replacement down the line, like, could we see Chase in more like a manufactured slot role, maybe a career high in slot snaps?
I mean, I think it's either or, right? I mean, I don't think it has to be, or I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it's like maybe some game plans we will see a lot of Chase there, and which is like only good. The manufactured touches stuff. Maybe 5-10 years ago that would have been derogatory, but that's kind of what we want now. We would kind of prefer there to be 3 or 4 manufactured touches for our guys per game.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I've got no issue with that.
Yeah, I think I would take that as a big positive if they're moving him around a little bit more just because of the speed they're getting with Burton, the big downfield threat they're getting with Burton. Definitely, I'm very bullish on Jamar Chase this year, as I'm sure you are as well. Back to me, and I'm going to go with, there's a lot of people out there sort of fading Devon Achane. I've talked about him at length as a guy that I've been targeting in best ball. It seems like early 3rd round Devon Achane, it's like, how could you not draft some? He's a guy that I've been sort of unwavering with in Dynasty. To me, the Jalen Wright pick was a significant move for Miami, but it seems more like a Raheem Mostert replacement down the line than somebody who's going to usurp what Devon Achane is. I think that Devon Achane has a tremendous year. I think he finishes as a top 5 running back in PPR scoring. I think he scores somewhere around 270 PPR points, and he just has a phenomenal year. He ends up being a player that if you draft him in a dynasty startup, you feel great about it. If you held on to him this year and didn't sell high in that window, you're going to feel great about it. And I think he's going to be a very impactful pick in best ball as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, come on, running back 5. How about we do running back 1? How about we
okay.
we go?
Yeah, you're right. I should take it off. Let's go 300 PPR points.
Achane stays healthy, plays 17 games. He doesn't even have to send Mostert to the bench. Mostert can totally do whatever he wants to do and be around and I mean, how about Mostert can be there and still score his touchdowns. I think a great example of this would be either of the crazy Chris Johnson years. Lendale White was a big part of those crazy Chris Johnson years, still getting part of that. Javon Ringer was playing on some of those crazy Chris Johnson seasons. I think that is really the comp for Devon Achane, where it's all efficiency based and everyone the whole time is saying, oh, he can't keep getting away with it. He's not going to average 7.8 yards per carry. He's not going to score a touchdown from 30 yards out every single time. And on a long enough timeline, they'll be right. But I just want to be drafting and owning in Dynasty a ton of players who've got that ability. And I don't even have to question it with Achane because I've already seen it. I mean, multiple 30-point games as a rookie. I'm just going to take that.
Yeah, I mean, in Dynasty right now, he's also so much cheaper than the Gibbs and the Bijan Robinson tier, but he could outscore both of them this year. So I'm glad you're on that train. Yeah. So and the quality of the offense, we talk about Mike McDaniel in year 3, he's got a little bit more of a full deck there. Jonnu Smith, I think, was an underrated addition for him for what he can do schematically. This offense could go even more insane and have some weeks like we saw from them towards the beginning of last year. So definitely both on the Achane train. Don't fade him. No one should ever fade him. Tremendous player. Back to you, Davis. Give us a hot one.
All right, this one is pretty hot. You're gonna have to search far and wide for someone who agrees with me on this one. Rashid Shaheed catches 80 passes or more for the 2024 New Orleans Saints. Couple things going on here. The depth chart in terms of intermediate pass catchers for the Saints, I mean, it's over, right? No Michael Thomas. We got Juwan Johnson. We got Alvin Kamara. These are kind of your options for intermediate receivers. And for how efficient Shaheed has been as an NFL player, he really has very rarely been a full-time player. Only 4 games total last season with more than 70% or more of the Saints' offensive snaps and only 4 games as well with 7 or more targets. He also, led the offense in average depth of target for the entire season. And that stuff is not going to go away. But I do wonder if both Olave and Shaheed have to just play a more comprehensive role, because the third option on these Saints, it's what are we going to do with A.T. Perry? A.T. Perry played 53% of the Saints' available snaps in the 12 games he played and got 18 targets. He just is not a guy who gets open.
I like this one a lot, and Shaheed's certainly been an easy person for me to draft on best ball. I have a couple of Shaheed shares still in Dynasty. We've seen success from him, and yet there's this kind of argument out there for secondary target to Olave. A lot of people have brought up the intermediate route guy. Some guy's just going to jump out of nowhere, maybe above means, but we've already seen it from Shaheed. He's got the most pedigree there, the most production, and there was a time like his rookie year where he had as many spike weeks as Olave for a nice little stretch of that year. So 80 catches with that sort of speed, he'd be a massive ADP win, and just a guy you could steal in Dynasty startups right now. Late round guy. I think I got him on a FFPC Triflex startup in the 18th round. People do not care about Rashid Shaheed right now. I'm going to go with a little more well-known wide receiver. You're not going to have to search for this one. Garrett Wilson. It's a revenge tour for him. Last year, we saw him steam into the end of the first round when we got into the money weeks. There was some NFFC leagues where he was going 6 overall in September. in FFPC, he was living towards the end of the first round in like those Vegas drafts. Garrett Wilson is going to give you the season that we were betting on last year, and he's going to do it on the strength of touchdowns and yardage. I don't think the targets have to increase at all. In fact, I think the targets could go down. He was 168 targets last year. He could be a 155 target player, but the efficiency and the touchdowns are going to go up so much. The offense is going to be so much better. Even if Aaron Rodgers is a shell of his former self, this is still going to be the best quarterback that Garrett Wilson has ever played with by a country mile. Garrett Wilson has 12 touchdown catches and 1,400 receiving yards, about the same amount of catches last year, gets you about 90 catches, 95 catches, and finishes inside of the top 3 at the wide receiver position.
All right, so you pretty much hit the nail on the head to why this is easy, which is that even if Rodgers does play quite poorly, even if we do see Rodgers really come back to being kind of a league average quarterback, I mean, Garrett Wilson would have killed for league average quarterback play last season, like some of what he and Breece Hall were forced to play through last year with, Trevor Siemian and Dan Boyle, Mike Boyle, just like it's. And Nathaniel Hackett without Aaron Rodgers is completely a mess. I wonder if I actually have not chosen to be bullish enough about Garrett Wilson. Like, I wonder if he's one of the handful of guys who is available to maybe be the number 1 player selected in fantasy football next season. I wonder if I should spend some more time thinking about that. Because, you're talking about the targets going down, and I'm looking at the offense being like, well, how could it really? I mean, what really would like Mike Williams, even Mike Williams healthy and his pomp and circumstance, is not a target hog. He is like someone who does well touchdown efficiency. Malachi Corley, I think Malachi Corley is just there to kind of be a really advanced version of McCole Hardman or Xavier Gibson. Like, I don't think they plan on giving him the ball 100 times. So it's kind of all out there right now for Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, everything's there. I mean, Breece Hall took that step forward as a guy. Breece Hall might not be needed to have quite as many targets.
Sure.
I think he's going to be way more efficient as a runner, too, is sort of an argument. And Breece Hall is a great pick as well. I think that you kind of nailed it, where some people are making the bet on Williams, some people are making the bet on Corley. There's always Tyler Conklin people out there who are sort of like the break glass in case of emergency tight end. But Garrett Wilson, it's just, you've seen it before with Aaron Rodgers, him being able to support a guy like a Devontae Adams. I think you could see a Garrett Wilson scoring like a top-of-the-line Devontae Adams type season. And what a value he is, because you're getting him sort of outside of like the truly elite guys. Like, he's cheaper than Amon-Ra St. Brown in these startups. He's kind of converged with Malik Neighbors, which I love Neighbors. But you saw some sharp people this year making that pivot over to Neighbors with their Wilson shares. I couldn't really get there, and I love Neighbors. We're back to you, Davis. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I can't get there either. So I've got this one is well, I suppose it's both a hot take and not a hot take at all. Actually, you don't even have to squint really that hard to see it. But my next one is that Patrick Mahomes sets the single season passing touchdown record. So, I mean, Mahomes has already led the NFL in passing touchdowns twice. He has already led the NFL in passing yards once. He has won MVP twice. These were the touchdown distributions the last time that Mahomes threw 50 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill had 12. Kelsey had 10. But then we're talking about Chris Conley had 5. Sammy Watkins had 3. Demetrius Harris had 3. Anthony Sherman had 1. DeAnthony Thomas had 1. And you look at their offense now and you go, I mean, what's really the functional difference between Pacheco and Hunt? I mean, maybe Hunt in his prime was a little bit better, but I wouldn't even say I'm that confident. But the 3 wide receiver grouping of Worthy, Brown, Rice with Kelsey and Pacheco, I mean, certainly the third guy there is better than any third guy that ever played with Tyreek and Chris Conley. This actually is the chance to be the most efficient, best version of the Chiefs offense. And the crazy thing market-wise is the market, it kind of acknowledges that there's a chance for it, but they don't make you pay for it. Like right now, outside of Worthy, you could get any Chiefs player you wanted. Like any Chiefs player you wanted in Dynasty, you could go get. I mean, Mahomes probably not. Like Mahomes they'll probably just say no. But if you message the Kelsey owner, You message the Worthy owner, you message the Rice owner, you message the Hollywood Brown owner. I mean, how about Kadarius Toney for like $3 fab dollars? I bet you could get him too. So I'm pretty bullish. I mean, the Chiefs have already started talking about this, like, oh, we really want to add the downfield element back into the offense. I think it's going to be a bit of a revenge tour for Pat.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. And we're recording this on Friday. That's going to air over the weekend. But on Thursday, Billy Muzio and I in First Class Fantasy did our bounce back players. And it was, it was a couple guys who you would have predicted, Kyle Pitts, Devonta Smith. But Mahomes made the top 5 because it's sort of like we think about Mahomes winning the Super Bowl, and everybody has a sort of the recency bias with that. But last year,
they sucked in the regular season.
They were terrible. And he finishes as QB 10 in points per game. This was the lowest we've seen from him. The year before, he was QB 2. So, with your prediction, if he throws that many touchdown passes, he's QB 1 again. And it's sort of like the absolute revenge tour would be unbelievable. But I think it's there. I mean, they to start last season, it was MVS and Justin Watson as his top 2 wide receivers when they lost to Detroit. Now, even if Rashee Rice is out for a little bit of a suspension, and that's another factor, Davis, is the suspension might not be nearly as much as some people are predicting. It might be like 3-4 games. So to start the year, it's going to be Worthy and Hollywood Brown with Kelsey. I mean, all that speed on the outside, you could see Kansas City just putting on a fireworks show to start the year. Super, super exciting one. Okay, so back to me. I'm going to stay at the wide receiver well. In 2021, we saw Jamar Chase finish as wide receiver 5, and Jalen Waddle just missed wide receiver 1 land at wide receiver 13. This year, we're going to see it. We already see where Marvin Harrison Jr. is the highest drafted rookie wide receiver ever in best ball, and he'll be the highest rookie wide receiver drafted ever in redraft. Malik Neighbors is also right there for highest wide receiver drafted ever in both formats. And both of these players are going to reward managers who are taking the unknown upside. And both of these guys finish inside of wide receiver 1 land. The Marvin Harrison Jr. one, that's easy. Everybody can kind of see that one. But I think that he's outstanding. I think he finishes right around wide receiver 4. Comparable to Puka in terms of fantasy points. Definitely will not catch quite as many balls, but will catch a lot of touchdowns and have more yardage. The Malik Neighbors argument is he is going to be peppered with targets. He's going to lead all rookie wide receivers in targets. This is going to be the focal point of the New York offense. The whole, we've never seen Daniel Jones target a guy that heavily. We saw stretches, though. Isaiah Hodgins, they had a stretch of time where Isaiah Hodgins was getting like 10 targets a game for like 4 or 5 games in a row. They've sort of wanted this last year with Darren Waller acquisition where it just didn't work out. But Brian Dable, we saw it with Stephon Diggs. First year, he got a guy like Stephon Diggs in Buffalo, 160 targets. Malik Neighbors, 155 targets as a rookie, leads all rookies, does just enough to get inside of wide receiver 1 land. You don't like it? You don't like it, Davis?
No, I can't get there with Neighbors because it's just so hard for a shitty offense to produce a guy. Like, can Malik Neighbors be a value at ADP? Can Malik Neighbors have spike weeks that make him totally worth drafting? Can his fantasy value from 2024 to 2025 increase? Absolutely. Can he outscore Chase and Waddle? Can he be the wide receiver 8? I mean, I suppose if he ran hotter than the sun on touchdowns, right? Like that is what it is. It's just there's not enough touchdowns available when Daniel Jones is your quarterback and this is your team. I think it's definitely more possible now for both of these guys just because rookies there's no seasoning, there's no waiting in. Like these guys are just going to be full 80% of the routes from week 1, like no question about it. And MHJ, I actually think probably will finish as a top 10 wide receiver, but it's so hard to imagine the Giants environment giving us one.
Well, there we go. We're button heads again. Malik Neighbors to the moon. Davis Mattek says, cool the Jets a little bit. Pours a little cold water on the Malik Neighbors drafters. Your turn, Davis. Give us a hot one.
All right.
This is the best one, by the way. This
So
one's the
this
best
is
one.
hot, but it feels like it shouldn't be. Like, it feels like when I say this, it's almost self-evident. But Justin Jefferson leads the NFL in all of NFL in fantasy points scored. We are 2 years away from him going 128 receptions, led the NFL, 1,800 yards, led the NFL, 9 touchdowns, didn't lead the NFL. Obviously, a little bit of touchdown variance in his favor. I think that the math breaks out that it's like you're supposed to get about 1 touchdown for every 105 yards. The math could be a little bit different now because scoring was down across in the NFL last offseason. But this is already a guy who is going number 1 overall in fantasy football. It's not as if we even have to go back in our memory, be like, oh, I don't know, is it even possible for him to do that? He was the number 1 overall wide receiver in 2022, 5th overall in points scored with 241 standard points. So that's not accounting for his 108 receptions. Why can't Justin Jefferson be the number 1 overall fantasy point scorer? So you'd say, oh, I prefer Tyreek. I prefer CeeDee Lamb. I prefer Jamar Chase. And I'm not here to tell you you're wrong to do that. But what I would say is when I draw the 6th pick, I do just do a little windmill because JJ McCarthy's fine, and even if he's not, which I think he will be, I mean, Nick Mullins was throwing about 380 yards per game in the 2 games that he started. Sure, Jaron Hall didn't get there, but the KOC Shanahan tree style offense, I mean, it's just bred to get Justin Jefferson 9 easy catches a game.
Yeah, I love this one. And it's funny how maybe the best wide receiver in football finishing as the top scorer is sort of like a bold hot take. But you're seeing Jamar Chase, you're seeing CeeDee Lamb love. Like Justin Jefferson, there's a window to kind of get him in Dynasty because people are worried about the quality of the offense. So, and you never see this sort of window for a player who's had this sort of success at this age, and then they draft a quarterback in the 1st round, and you still have this window. And I'll say one other element that I think a lot of people aren't talking about now, but I think it'll be a thing people are talking about in August is TJ Hawkinson could miss a significant portion of time where it's sort of a Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson bull argument. And Aaron Jones also is a newcomer who played 12 games last year and he's 29 years old. So anybody thinking this is going to be some massive, usage of the running back, I think it's going to be an incredibly consolidated target tree where you're going to get as much Justin Jefferson as you can handle for maybe the first 4 games of the year, and Jordan Addison seeing extra targets as well. It's going to be somewhat like we saw with Miami with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in the year 1 of Mike McDaniel, where it's just an insane amount of targets for both those guys. So I like that one as well. I think it's funny how you get excited when you draft him at 6. It could be an ultimate gift where Jefferson going 6th overall in best ball.
Definitely.
I've seen a couple of trades where in Dynasty, people who have a really strong roster have pivoted, made a trade such as Justin Jefferson to get Bijan Robinson.
I actually got offered Jefferson the other day in a league, and I didn't snap take it because it's a buying roster that's kind of on its last legs. So I got to be pretty careful about the picks that go out the door, but I'm thinking I probably will ultimately end up making the move.
Yeah. I mean, even if he were off on him, he's still going to be a top 3 wide receiver in startups next year. And JJ McCarthy going into year 2.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I love that one. I'll go with another wide receiver, and I think this one's a little spicy. But Zay Flowers sets a Ravens wide receiver record with Lamar Jackson for most receptions. This is not a massive bar to climb. Hollywood Brown has a 91 catch season with Lamar. You're going to see Zay Flowers catch 95. Zay Flowers is going to take a big step forward. And I think that the Todd Monken offense is going to be using him like we saw in that playoff game, where I think the big takeaway was, the fumble. But you also saw Zay Flowers with 115 receiving yards, 5 catches in that game. He's not going to catch Derek Mason, but he'll have the 2nd most catches for a Ravens wide receiver all time. And he'll be a big win at ADP.
I love it. I mean, that is, I suppose I don't have that strong of a take about Zay Flowers. I think mostly what I feel about Zay Flowers is reflected by how I feel about Lamar. And Lamar still seems like a buy to me. There was that crazy stretch last year for like 6 weeks where he didn't run a touchdown in, and Gus Edwards was scoring like 2 touchdowns a week. And, for fantasy managers, that can be pretty frustrating. But Lamar was, actually quite efficient. Actually, it was one of his better passing efficiency seasons. He was, super efficient as a runner, but did not have to run that much. I think the thing you should feel most comfortable with was that he threw over 400 passes for the first time, 457 passing attempts. The Todd Monken effect totally took hold of that offense. And I think it is really only going to go one direction from there, because I think they do realize, like, if we want to get over the mountain, we want to beat the Chiefs, we want to beat the 49ers, we want to win a Super Bowl, like, we are going to have to be able to throw 35 times a game. And Flowers, I think, after being so good, especially to close last season, feels like he has gotten a little bit lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, he's sort of like a forgotten one where people kind of like him, but like you see it in best ball right now, where some people like the Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews stack, the Zay Flowers. Like it's a real split right now. So I think Flowers is very good, and I think he's dynamic. And I think, like you said, it's the sort of changing the guard in Baltimore, and then the Tez Walker addition and a healthy Bateman. Like, those guys stylistically aren't going to affect Flowers. They're very different than him. So again, I really like that Flowers one. Give us your next one.
All right. For my next one, I've got Maye, and any Patriots pass catcher is in the Best Ball Best Ball Mania 5 winning lineup. Obviously, that's not a super specific dynasty take, other than to say that Drake Maye is going to play more as a rookie than I think the market is anticipating, and he's going to play way better than the market is anticipating. I think basically the way the market is treating him is they've already decided he's like Zach Wilson before he takes a snap. And I don't know. What I saw from him at the University of North Carolina and kind of where he falls in the overall hierarchy of prospects, I really can see more of like Justin Herbert ranges of outcomes for him than the market is seeing. And I liked what they did in the draft, adding Polk and Baker and offensive linemen and Antonio Gibson. Like, they basically were just like, we're going to get what we can to make the offense better.
It's a really interesting one. And I've sort of brought up this several times that, like, Patriots could lose games, but Drake Maye landing in New England as opposed to like a Minnesota, it gives him I think a higher rushing floor. And I think the chances of him being effective running around the goal line, like, he had a lot of rushing production at UNC. And I think people are sort of overlooking that a little bit. I think they could lose a lot and he could just be okay. But if he's giving you that rushing floor, he'll be an interesting one. And like you said, like, last year with New England, nobody wanted to draft any Patriots except for Ramondre Stevenson. He was like that guy where if you wanted him, you'd have to take him in, like, I believe he was a 3rd round pick on Underdog this time last year. Now Ramondre is going at like pick number 80. No one wants any Patriots. So you can get all these guys for free. And Polk and Baker, you bring both those guys up. They are both sort of like keeping each other's price down in Dynasty, because you have people who like Polk, you have people who like Baker, and then you have people who just could care less about the situation entirely. So that's a big indicator on New England, potentially really, really beating expectations. Your thoughts on, is there a wide receiver there that you're interested in Dynasty if you had to go Polk or Baker?
I think I would go, Polk, obviously. I mean, look, he was the one who went 37 overall. But at cost, I definitely prefer Baker, because Baker is the one who more likely represents the big fantasy win, where when Polk hits, you'll get, a nice kind of possession wide receiver, really good season for him. It's like 80 receptions, 1,100 yards, like a really good season. But a Baker hit is like, that's the deep threat guy who really hits with Drake Maye, and they're making like sweet, sweet music, throwing, deep bombs to each other. And that might be like a 2% outcome or whatever, but it's a pretty sweet outcome if and when it does happen.
So I'm going to stay with a rookie. I'm going to go with a more high-profile rookie, and I'm going to go with Jonathan Brooks. And Jonathan Brooks was the first running back off the board. Went as a late, the late 40s to Carolina, and he lands in an offense where I think we were all really excited about Jonathan Brooks landing in Dallas. It's what the Vegas books were telling us. but he lands instead in a situation where I think he's going to thrive as a 3-down back with volume. Dave Canales gave Rachaad White 322 touches last year. Jonathan Brooks, if healthy, is going to have a shocking amount of usage. I think that he's going to finish as a top 15 running back only because the offense is not going to support him on enough touchdowns to drive him into RB1 land, but it's going to be very close. But I think when the season ends, Jonathan Brooks is going to be treated as like a top 6 to 8 back in dynasty startups. He's going to gain a considerable amount of dynasty value this year during his rookie season, and he's going to give you immediate returns if you're drafting him in redraft, drafting him in best ball, RB 15 overall in PPR.
So that's pretty interesting. So where did you have him ranked in rookie drafts?
We had Benson and him like side by side. Both of those guys were, if it's super flex, they were going in that. It was a top 8 tier, and then we would have those guys in consideration if you're a win now team, somewhere in that 9 through 13 range with Brian Thomas's, the Ladd McConkeys, the Bo Nix's. So it was sort of a tier for me. I ended up with not as much Jonathan Brooks as I thought, Davis, because he steamed up in a lot of these FFPC leagues. Like I was a sort of in Dynasty, I'm going to take shots on Xavier Worthy. I'm going to take shots on Brian Thomas ahead of him. And I thought I would get my Jonathan Brooks exposure in single QB down to at the 108. It didn't really happen. I have some Jonathan Brooks.
I didn't get him in any. I didn't get him in any FFPC, any like self-contained. Like I got none of him because I had Worthy ranked over him, and also most of the teams I had needed what Bo Nix offers. Not that I think Bo Nix is going to be a fantasy superstar, but I do think he's going to start for like 3 years for Denver, and that is pretty valuable. I to be honest, don't really have a super strong take on Jonathan Brooks. I think you're right that Dave Canales is all about using one guy, and that's totally what he prefers, and he clearly wants Jonathan Brooks to be that guy. I am not a Bryce Young bull, so it's like Canales just is going to have to MacGyver this offense together, and maybe he'll do it and maybe he won't. But if he does, so if this is the 18th best offense in the NFL, I totally think Brooks will hit all those benchmarks.
If anyone's going to get something out of Bryce Young, it's Dave Canales, the quarterback whisperer. Baker Mayfield was dead in Dynasty. Geno Smith was deader in Dynasty.
Yes.
Both of those guys had success with Canales. So if Young can't get it together, then he's a massive bust. So we'll see. We'll see for sure. I think Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette additions, and then they added some interior offensive line help. And then adding Brooks, I think, takes a lot of heat off of a poor quarterback or a mediocre quarterback, because I think Brooks can become sort of the focal point of the offense, a little bit more running back centric, and take a little bit of pressure off of Bryce Young. So I think that could be just the pathway to protecting him and getting, as much utility as they can out of Bryce Young, and see if they can salvage, this one-on-one. Because I think that's the Dave Canales was hired as like this QB whisperer. So definitely an interesting one. We are back to you. This is a sort of a depressing one you're going to drop on people.
I am going to do it. And I mean, look, I think a very fair response to what I'm about to say would be that I've said this opinion a lot, but Derrick Henry has fewer than 1,000 rushing yards this season. You can take, if you wanted to be a bull, you could take that one of two ways. You could say, yeah, sure, he's got 880 rushing yards, but he scored 20 touchdowns because Lamar just put him there on the 1 yard line a bunch. In fact, let's see here. How many yards for Gus Edwards? Yep. 810 yards and 13 touchdowns for Gus Edwards last season. Look, would you take that from Henry? Probably not. You might take it from him. Actually, if you've just had Derrick Henry on your roster forever and you've said, I'm not selling, send me whatever you want, I'm keeping my guy, maybe you would take it. But, he's 30 years old. I wonder what the efficiency will be like. The efficiency was not good last year. I don't know. I am out at cost in redraft. I've never owned Derrick Henry in Dynasty. I suppose to be helpful, what would you take for Derrick Henry? And I'd probably be more likely to buy Derrick Henry, though, now that I'm saying this out loud, because you could probably get him for like the 304, in a 2025 third.
I think it's league specific. Derrick Henry's one of the most all of these older guys, it's completely league specific because a lot of these guys that are holding the Derrick Henrys, the Cooper Kupps, they're holding these guys thinking that this is my I'm pushing the chips in. I'm going for it. I don't care if it's their last year. But yeah, I have like one Derrick Henry share left. And last year I made sure I grabbed Tyjae Spears thinking I'd have like a blackjack split. Didn't quite work, but it's sort of like that team was second overall last year in a competitive FFPC league. And this year it was one of the better rosters. So I'm like, I'm just in. It's fine. And the roster quality is like if Derrick Henry's RB20, I'm okay. But if he beats expectations, that's great. But I have a real question for you, though. So the fade of Derrick Henry, I can understand because he's been a guy where people have been trying to fade him for a couple of years now. And then, and one thing we've been doing as drafters, especially in redraft, is we've been targeting that handcuff, thinking this is the sharp move. I'm going to get I'm going to get Evans, or I'm going to get Hassan Haskins, or I'm going to get whoever his backup is, and I'm going to stash that guy on my roster. And then last year, Tyjae Spears, there was like, hey, if Derrick Henry misses time, Tyjae to the moon. This year, it's weird because you have Justice Hill, who's a guy who's really done nothing. Then you have Rasheen Ali drafted, and just drafted despite a bicep tear. And he's like, 210 pounds, was very productive at Marshall. Keaton Mitchell also coming back from an injury. But there's not like I must draft this handcuff to Derrick Henry mentality anywhere. I haven't heard any people on that. Is there if you're fading Derrick Henry, is there a running back that you're interested in on Baltimore? Let's say if Derrick Henry misses time, who's that guy that people are pushing in and making a huge waiver wire bid for at some point this year?
Yeah, I think I am getting there on Rasheen Ali. I think after kind of investigating the situation a little bit more deeply, I think it is Keaton Mitchell's going to miss too much time. Justice Hill is just, special teams, third downs, knows the playbook, knows the team, knows the coaches. We'd like to have him back. But Rasheen Ali is, he had gotten injured at Marshall, ran track when he was injured. I thought that was because it was a hand injury. So he's like, whatever, I just need to stay active, and then ran track as like a big bulky.
That's like you have that dog. You have that dog in you. You're like, hey, track coach, can I join the track team? They're like, sure, come on, Rasheen. That's awesome.
Yeah, that is extreme dog from Rasheen. And to take a guy from a non-Power 5 school, so there was that great stat going around that this was like the most Power 5 heavy draft of all time. Pretty obvious why. Guys can just transfer to the better schools now. So to take a group of 5 running back in the 5th round when you didn't really have to, I thought it was a pretty big statement. I think they probably do plan on Rasheen Ali kind of being the second running back, and the market is not really treating it that way right now.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And he was a guy that in FFPC drafts, he like no one drafted him in. I don't know how they determine like the preset order, but he was a guy where you could scroll way, way, way down and get Rasheen Ali in like the 5th, 6th, 7th round. So that's an interesting one. You could see if he gets any sort of positive momentum during the summer, that's a guy that people are drafting in like the 18th, 19th round in redraft leagues. Definitely an interesting one. I'm going to go with a sort of an under the radar player, but you have Lombardi as the offensive coordinator in Denver. This team is an absolute mess. I watched, the press conference where you see Sean Payton talking about their wide receiver options. He's talking about Josh Reynolds. He's talking about the size and speed at the wide receiver position. And it's sort of like through his teeth talking about all these wonderful options. Greg Dulcich at tight end. And then they're talking about the competition in the backfield. They add Blake Watson. They had Estime. Javonte Williams is back. Samaje Perine back. But Jaleel McLaughlin is a guy that impressed me last year. He had 31 catches as a rookie. And I think that Lombardi is going to use the running backs. They're going to target the running backs just like we've seen in previous Lombardi offenses. And you are going to see Jaleel McLaughlin lead Denver in running backs in PPR points this year. He's going to have enough utility that he's going to be somewhere around the low end RB2, high end RB3 range. and he's basically free in Dynasty right now.
Look, I really could not agree anymore with you. I'm not an estimate guy. I think Watson's got some skill. I think he's got some talent, but there definitely is a reason he was like a 5-year transfer player. Although the Memphis running backs, it's like go to Memphis and you'll end up being a running back in the NFL. Gibson, Pollard, Henderson, Patrick Taylor. There was 5 of them at one point who all ended up being on NFL rosters. I think 2017 maybe. Gainwell.
Kenny Gainwell. Yep.
Yeah. So, but Jaleel is just like he led all of college football in rushing yards 2 years ago at a smaller school, and pretty clear Sean Payton just has the hard on for him. Really, let's just be real about it. Sean Payton just likes him and doesn't seem that into Javonte. P. Ryan is going to be cut. The team can save $3 million cutting or trading him. Wonder if P. Ryan ends up back in Cincinnati. Actually, I think that's definitely a possibility, which would not be great for the Chase Brown bags, but not a big estimate guy. Yeah, I really love this one. I think it's very strong.
We had an undrafted free agent last year in Jalen Warren finish as an RB2. Certainly Austin Eckler did it a million times. And Jaleel McLaughlin, I don't know about the longevity, but we could see it this year. There's so many targets there. We also talk about the strengths of Bo Nix. You have Sean Payton basically attaching his future on Bo Nix. You're going to see Bo Nix on the field. What does Bo Nix do well? Makes short, low A-dot throws, a high efficiency guy with a little bit, and he can run a little bit. Targeting the running backs makes a lot of sense. And Bucky Irving led the nation in receptions by a college running back last year. So Bo Nix likes dumping.
Yeah, Bo Nix is a screen merchant. That is why he got drafted to play like 41-year-old Drew Brees. That's kind of been my thought. That's
right. All right, so you have a fun one here, a very fun one, and one that I think people are going to be like, yes.
Well, is it fun, or am I just being held hostage by Kyle Pitts? So I've got Kyle Pitts finishes as the tight end 2. I'm not going to say tight end 1 because I think Kelsey will just repeat as tight end 1. I mean, it's just if I'm going to believe Mahomes has this comeback season, I gotta mean that happens for Kyle Pitts as well. So Kyle Pitts obviously now has a real NFL quarterback throwing to him. He's got Zach Robinson as his offensive coordinator, who is no big fan of the tight end position, but I think is just a smart, talented offensive coordinator. Tyler Higbee did have a couple of those 3 touchdown games when Zach Robinson was calling plays. But really, it comes down to I never stopped believing Kyle Pitts was good. He's never really had the quarterback play to flourish. He still did have that 1,000-yard season as a rookie, only with the 1 touchdown. I just believe, man. I really just believe, and that is all there is to it.
Yeah, and this is a fun one. This was our number 1 when Billy and I did our bounce backs. Kyle Pitts was number 1. Everybody's betting on this, but it's not wrong just because everybody's betting on it. He's 23 years old, and you've already seen him have a 1,000-yard season. It's not like this is like some, oh my God, Kyle Pitts has never had anything more than 600 receiving yards, but this is the year because he's 23 and it gets an improvement. We saw it, 1,000 yards for a tight end and that sort of targets. And last year, even in a train wreck, he still had 90 targets. So that's doable to improve on and finish as tight end 2. That would get everybody excited. Definitely would get everybody excited. And I'll go with the sort of another, hey, we've been waiting a long time for this player, Jameson Williams. And I used your Best Ball Mania reference for Drake Maye, where Jameson Williams is on Best Ball Mania championship rosters. He scores 25 points in week 17 versus the 49ers, and he takes a big step forward in year 3. And essentially, it's like a year 2 for him because he's missed so much time. This is a guy where it's a big projection to say that he's going to get enough usage, but I think he is going to absorb. I think he's going to more than double his targets. Not a huge bar to climb, but I think he's going to absorb the Josh Reynolds usage, where it's about 65 targets. If you put that together, that puts him at about 105 targets with the manufactured running plays and his explosive nature. I think if he gets 105 targets, there is a chance that Jameson Williams finishes as a wide receiver 2 this year in this quality of an offense. We've sort of been waiting around for it. We've seen flashes with the really big plays here and there. I think he'll be a very frustrating player at times, but
definitely.
The spike weeks, though, he's going to be a guy where I throw Jameson Williams in the flex this year. Spike weeks are going to lead him through, and he'll be a wonderful player in best ball, but I think he's going to have utility for you on your dynasty rosters and your redraft teams.
Well, finally, for the first time ever, the news about Jameson Williams has been good.
Yes.
The commentary has been positive, where most of what we have gotten in Jameson Williams's career the coach has been being like, yeah, I mean, he just doesn't, he's not focused. He's not here. He's not ready for this, whatever, the gambling incident, all of that stuff is well, publicized and out there. So I love this one. I mean, I can't say that I have been targeting Jameson Williams super aggressively, because that would not be the case. But I definitely believe it's more possible now than I did like 2 months ago, especially after the Lions did not make a real move either in free agency or the draft to address a vertical wide receiver.
So you have another one. This one you added, we added today, and I thought this was really exciting because I have a ton of this player on my dynasty rosters.
Yeah, so I've got we're going back to the Packers here. I've got Marshawn Lloyd leads the Packers backfield in PPR points. So doesn't mean he gets more carries than Josh Jacobs, because I don't think that's the Packers' plan. I don't think that's the most likely scenario. But I do think Lloyd will be the change of pace, third down, 60. He'll be the 40% of the 60-40. And, you listener at home, you might be like, they went out to go get Josh Jacobs. They made this move. Why would they do that? I mean, LaFleur is very clearly philosophically committed to the two backfield split. He gave Dion Lewis, as an offensive coordinator, he gave Dion Lewis more carries or more total touches than Derrick Henry the season that he called plays for the two of them. He's had, A.J. Dillon, 2 yards in a cloud of dust, getting carries when Aaron Jones was clearly better than him. The Jamal Williams stuff with Aaron Jones, like, it's just all very clear. He's doing two running backs, and it's clear that Lloyd's going to be that second back.
Yeah, I love Lloyd, and it's sort of like he's arguably the best handcuff back in the league right now, because if Jacobs goes down, can you imagine the ceiling in that offense? And you talk about Aaron Jones, like, he can do a lot of the work out of the backfield as a receiver, but he's also that handcuff plus where even if you're wrong here, the fact that they use two running backs, I forgot the exact touches, but it's been a pretty long stretch where the number 2 running back in Green Bay, like you said, is getting usage. So Marshawn Lloyd, I know they're excited about him. And I think people sort of discount the fact that a second running back is used because of A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon got enough usage to be impactful for us. He just isn't very good. Marshawn Lloyd is kind of nasty. So that one's really exciting. And for me, I have my final one. I have a bonus one, but it's not as exciting. But my final one is Travis Etienne outscores Jonathan Taylor. And I think this is a very helpful one if you're drafting in best balls right now.
That is very interesting.
So Jonathan Taylor, we talked about Anthony Richardson, and Anthony Richardson is going to vulture away enough touchdowns that Jonathan Taylor is not going to score enough to return value at 16 overall. Anthony Richardson, the argument that this is going to be Jonathan Taylor kind of running to daylight and ripping off these long runs, I get it. But at the end of the day, a lot of his profile is the argument that he's going to score a ton of touchdowns. This offense is going to be really good. I have Anthony Richardson finishing as QB1 overall. But if we look back to the Mark Ingram season next to Lamar Jackson in 2019, obviously Jonathan Taylor is a little more there. But Davis, you had a ton of rushing touchdowns for Ingram that year, and he didn't come close to RB1 overall land. If I'm drafting a guy at 16 overall at running back, I want him to have a pathway to finish as RB1 overall. We also talk about Jonathan Taylor's season where he finished as RB1 overall. He had like 40 receptions. The average over the last 11 years for the RB1 overall has been 80 receptions. So I don't see Anthony Richardson as a guy who's going to be dumping down to the running back. I think that we see sort of a cap ceiling on what Taylor can do as a receiver, and we're going to have a guy who can vulture him around the goal line in Anthony Richardson. He's going to have to run for an extreme amount of rushing yards in order to cover that number. Whereas Travis Etienne, we saw him take a step forward there was the big disappointment with ETN his rookie year was he was not used as a receiver at all.
Right.
Last year, he gets 58 receptions. This year, they have 2 new wide receivers, and ETN, I think, can get 70 catches. I think ETN, the offense for Jacksonville is going to be good enough, and I think he takes a step forward as a receiver. And right now, in Dynasty startups, ETN has gone down a little bit, and Jonathan Taylor has steamed up. So I think ETN is a guy where you can get him now reasonably in Dynasty, and certainly in best ball and in redraft. Taylor, I think, is going to go just a little bit overdrafted. If I could get Taylor in the 3rd round of best balls, I'd be more interested than having to take him right next to Saquon. I mean, what's the argument here? Saquon is right next to him. I think Saquon's going to outscore Taylor as well.
See, I'm a real Saquon bear. I just don't see how he gets. I think he's got the same issue as Taylor. How does he get the touchdowns? How does he get the receptions? Although obviously, I think the deal with Taylor is he's much more likely to get those touchdowns than Barkley because, I mean, the Colts don't have the tush push, and they actually might be more invested in keeping Richardson healthy than the Eagles are in protecting Hurts.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one. I got some pushback from Billy as well on Taylor. Last year, I think Taylor was like RB12 in points per game, so he was productive. But again, like people are treating him like this is going to be a threat to the kind of the big 3 right now in redraft. I just don't see it. And I think the dynasty marketplace for Taylor, it's fine. But I just think you can look a little bit lower and find a guy in the same division that I think could actually outscore him this season. So my bonus one, because I didn't keep track of the 10 and 10, was Kendre Miller's this year's Jerome Ford. Gets enough.
Oh, I like that one a lot because I'm fading Kamara hard.
Yeah, so Kendre Miller, like Davis said, we have the coordinator change in New Orleans. Everything went right for Alvin Kamara last year. Kendre Miller, sort of everything went wrong. It's sort of when you look at the team, you need a back to step up and absorb touches. Kendre Miller has enough juice as a receiver and then enough contingent upside if Kamara were to miss time. Kamara's old now, guys. So
yeah,
Kendre Miller, it's like a Jerome Ford is sort of it doesn't sound that exciting, but Jerome Ford finishes inside of RB2 land, and it was sort of a guy that was kind of getting pushed down, into RB4 land in best balls. And Kendre Miller also was 20 last year. He's a younger back. I think if he was in this draft class out of TCU, he returned one more year to TCU, I think people would have been excited about him in this draft class. And there actually would be more enthusiasm for him if he would have just not been in the NFL last year because of the unknown. So definitely an interesting one.
I mean, that is exactly how it works. Is that when you totally prefer the devil you do not know to the devil that you do know. So I like that bonus one. I just in general, I don't like the ETN. Well, I don't hate the ETN JT one. I think they're both totally fine. Like I think JT is priced totally fine. I think ETN is priced totally fine. There's definitely been more chatter about limiting ETN's touchers than I would like from the coaching staff there. But then I look at the depth chart and I'm like, well, what are they going to do? You know, it's Dearness Johnson and Tank Bigsby again. And then they added Keelan Robinson, who is sort of interesting in the sense of he was an Alabama, Texas guy. But I think he was literally just drafted to play special teams. I don't even know how much running back he's even going to play.
I think so too. I think that he could actually play probably as many wide receiver snaps as running back snaps as well. But definitely interesting. Davis, this was without a doubt one of the most fun podcasts I've done in a while. We're literally just galaxy braining but we'll keep some track on this one. I think we have a couple of good predictions here and a couple of bold takes that people can exploit in dynasty values. Let everybody know where they can find your work and what you have coming out.
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Davis Mattek. If you search my name in any podcatcher, you'll find the Takecast and the Sports Creative Fantasy Football Podcast. And you can catch me every day on TV on Sports Grid.
Check him out. Check out Davis's work. It's very strong. And check out his podcasts. They're always helpful when you're entering into redraft season, especially. And stick with us here at Dynasty Life. I'm going to be bringing shows like this once or twice a week throughout the summer. We're going to help you crush your dynasty leagues this season. Talk to you soon.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.